Yo, what is going on, guys? Got a brand new episode of Buy or Bust for you guys today. We're going to be talking about the Prowler. Is this the best new Series 5 card released this season? It just might be. We're going to be talking about some of the key synergies, the counters, the good, the bad, the pros when it comes to the floor and the ceiling for this card, as well as 3 separate decks. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. In case you guys did not know, the Prowler is the brand new Series 5 card releasing on Tuesday. That is a 3-cost, 4-powered card with the ability, on reveal, add 2 Thieves' Tools to your hand, set their cost to 0 if a card moved last turn. This is what it looks like in game. And in order to get them to be 0 cost, meaning the skills to be 0 cost, a card has to move last turn, meaning before you reveal the Prowler. It does not check every turn like Miles does into the next turn, making Miles only a 1 cost after a card moved the previous turn. This only looks at it 1 time. So you have to move a card the turn before, or opponent has to move a card the turn before you reveal Prowler, then get the Thieves' Tools. Otherwise, they will be 1-cost Thieves' Tools. But what are these Thieves' Tools? We have, first and foremost, we have the Flight Harness, which is on reveal. Give your highest powered card here +1 power and move it to the right. Your second one is going to be Remote Minds, which is on reveal. Afflict the highest powered enemy card here with -2 power, but its highest 2 powered cards here. So 2 enemy cards or opponent's cards will be afflicted with -2 power. If there's only 1 card there, it should be only 1 affliction of -2. And then lastly, we have the Vibro Shot Gauntlets, which is an on reveal. Give your highest powered card here +2 power. You get +1 energy next turn. These all seem pretty solid. Of course, the more narrow one would be potentially the Remote Minds, because your opponent does have to have 2 cards there in order to get that ability to go off twice. It will affect 1 card with -2, but in order to get the maximum value, you do have to have 2 cards there by your opponent. But they're all skills, meaning that they can be played on the board and then they disappear. They do not take up a board space. They just have to be able to be, if they're not Cosmo, the ability goes off. If they are Cosmo'd, a Werewolf will still move into that lane because it was an on-reveal card played there, but their ability will not proc through a Cosmo. Which brings to mind some of our key synergies here. I have Werewolf by Night as being one of the key synergy because they are skills. They don't take up board space. The Prowler also is an on reveal as well that can move your Werewolf to give you the value there. Next, of course, we do have Silk. Silk is a card that can move pretty often, whether your opponent's playing a card there, whether you're playing a card there, that moves Silk, which could give you value in order to be able to get those skills to be able to cost 0 as long as Silk moved even just 1 time on the previous turn. And next we have Madam Web. If you wanted to run the Prowler maybe in some just regular move stuff, maybe instead of that, Spider Punk slot that some people are using for that standard Human Torch move list, this could work with Human Torch. Could work with Dagger as just some of those options because, of course, Flight Harness, adding 1 power to a card and moving it to the right is almost a free move for your card, as well as you have adding 2 power to your highest powered card here. Adding that to a torch before or after move is actually going to be kind of crazy, and you also get the extra energy the next turn. So it kind of would work really well in that just traditional Human Torch Madam Web move package too, which is why when we talk about some of these counters here, we're going to talk about Cosmo because it makes it so on reveal doesn't go off from the Prowler, and the skills will not go off because they'd be blocked by Cosmo's ongoing ability. You also have Mercury, and Mercury will offset cards moving prior, so maybe if you're trying to set up for a Prowler play, Mercury stops your cards from being able to move to set up the Prowler, which then, of course, the skills would cost 1 instead of you potentially having that opportunity for them to cost 0. It also affects, Flight Harness. It makes it so Flight Harness does not move a card to the right. You only get the extra power onto the card. And then, of course, Shadow King. Most of these abilities are going to be adding power to your cards. And then, of course, if it's afflicting 2 enemy cards with -2, your Shadow King can reset that lane from that -2 power onto 2 of their cards, as well as, offset the cards that moved and gained powered, and the highest powered cards, of course, that gained power before you had the extra energy. As we move on to the good for the Prowler, I want to note that all of the skills do look good. Potentially Remote Minds is one of the weaker ones because your opponent has to have 2 cards there to get the most value there, and Affliction isn't maybe something you're necessarily doing in your move-style decks, but it does hit 2 of their highest powered cards with -2. So that's honestly pretty decent. 1-4 seems pretty good more often than not. It just doesn't take up the board space, of course. And it's not the hardest, condition to meet for the skills. You're just not necessarily playing this out on turn 3. Unless your opponent or you moved something on turn 3. So you're more often not playing this later in the game, probably on like a turn 4 or like a turn 5 in order to get some of that maximum value. Of course, you could play it on curve if you're not worried about having, those skills cost 0, because then you can really play into just having those skills in your hand to be able to mess around with whatever your opponent's doing in that sense. And it's not bad base power, for a 3 cost, 3-4 is okay, but like with the ability it has, I think that also makes it better at a 3 cost, being a 3-4, and with what the skills can do. I think that's really solid for the card itself, and it's fairly flexible. Fairly flexible? I can't talk. Fairly flexible. Meaning, like, yes, you definitely would want to use this in a move list if you want your skills to cost 0, but you don't have to just use it in a move list. You do have options to be able to just get value immensely anyways, even if you're not trying to set the skills to 0, because the skills themselves are pretty good. Next, moving on to the bad for this card. Of course, it only counts the movements on a turn prior to play to be able to get the discount. Otherwise, they're going to be 1 cost, so if you are trying to get them to be discounted, it does have to be a moved card the turn prior. Next, it's a pretty bad late draw. If you draw this at the end of the game, it's just a 3-4. You don't get any of the extra utility that you would get from being able to play the skills. You won't always get the skills that you want or need. Maybe in certain situations, you'd rather have Flight Harness than having a Remote Mines or the Vibro Shock Gauntlets. So you're kind of maybe fishing for that, but if you don't get it, that's kind of feels bad. It doesn't necessarily mean it will be a super bad scenario for you, but you may not get what you truly want. As we move on to the floor and the ceiling for this card, I do think on the low end, like I said, you get the Prowler late, or you're not able to really use the skills. It's past the point where you would be wanting to use the skills for the Prowler. Maybe it is, adding the +2 to a card and then getting the extra energy. Maybe you don't need 2 power and you'd rather have had the extra energy earlier on. Or maybe your opponent has Luke Cage down, so the Remote Mines just completely nuke what you're trying to do there. Or maybe you can't really move anything to the right and you don't actually need the power from just the Flight Harness itself. So there's going to be maybe some situations like that. But I think on average, even if you don't get the discount on the skills, I think you're going to be able to play the Prowler and be able to have the skills to be used as 1-cost skills, which 1-cost skills are still really solid, as you see that kind of as like the norm right now with Deafening Chord, with the Merlin spells, with some of these spells coming out in the future too, like Wing Beast and stuff like that. Like 1-cost skills in general are just good. 0-cost skills even better, but 1-cost skills are good. But I do think on the top end, you're going to be able to have the Prowler have the discounted spells. You moved a card the previous turn, so they cost 0 for the remainder of the game. I don't know, zero cost cards that have really good ability seem pretty good. So I would say that is the top end, and I think that actually would be a really, really high opportunity for you, and I think it's totally possible to do. As we do move on to the first list over here, we have Buffin and Prowlin, which is pretty much just a move Hydra Stomper list. Of course, you have Viv Vision in here as another card that can move. Potentially, if you don't have any of these other move cards down, of course, it moves at the beginning of a turn, so it does not count as a card moving on the previous turn for Prowler. If you want to play Prowler the same turn that Viv moves, so you kind of have to play Prowler the following turn if Viv does move that way. That means you could play Viv on turn 3 on a lane that you think you're going to be losing. So then on turn 5, you would get that immediate Prowler value, or you could play Viv onto Silk, or you could play Spider-Punk onto Silk in order to get that Prowler on the next turn, on turn 4, being able to have your skills cost 0 going forward. It's kind of like the thought process there. You, of course, have Sandals and Shield that you can move on turn 3 as well, so you can play Prowler on turn 4 and get those bonuses. And every movement here counts towards Hydra Stomper. Your attack, of course, Mercury Cannonball is something to be able to offset what your opponent's doing. You also can move Mercury. You can move Viv, the Shield, Batroc, move all your cards with Hellion. Like, you have a lot of just Stomper value in here, too. Spider-Punk can go off twice with Hellion, which I really like as well. Or even using Spider-Punk with these skills from the Prowler. Of course, Flight Harness makes it so Spider-Punk moves also to the right before it also gains power as well, or I think after it actually gains power as well. So you get that Spider-Punk feature, so you can get that to go off another time, maybe even not even taking up your Spider-Punk's move, giving you some options there. And then you have also the additional Affliction with Prowler, Affliction with Spider-Punk. Like a lot of really just cool stuff I think you can mess around with in this list. So I think some sort of hybrid of this could totally be a home. Next, of course, we have kind of just a techie kind of Werewolf by Night list over here with some unknown factors, of course, with your Iron Patriot. You have Deafening Chord, which is an on-reveal skill that doesn't take up a board space, kind of like with Merlin here. And the Prowler, of course, you have the Hood, and you can get rid of the Hood potential with Nico or with the Merlin. You also have tech pieces with Juggernaut, Shadow King, and Cosmic Ghost Rider as cards that can kind of just help offset what your opponent's doing and just solo lanes potentially for you as well with Juggernaut. And then, of course, you have your utility, like I said, with Nico, or even, like with the Hood there, of course, to get that value of another just 6-power card you can play onto the board, which seems really nice. Of course, you have the movement with Werewolf by Night, movement with the Prowler, movement with Juggernaut. Those are 3 different movement cards to enable you to do Prowler things to get that discount with the Prowler. Next, of course, we're going to have an Agamotto list, which is going to be with endless skills, I say. It's a Werewolf by Night Agamotto list. I do think Werewolf by Night with Prowler is kind of like one of the main things we might be seeing. Of course, it'll be a Prowler probably more so on like a turn 5. Unless you can get Werewolf early and get some of the value there. That's definitely something to mess around with. And then like with Agamotto, you also have different, skills that you can mess around with. Winds of a Tomb can also move an opponent's card on turn 2. Allowing you to Prowler on 3 and get those free skills on turn 3. So you have another option there with Winds of a Tomb. Of course, you have the Werewolf for movement, and you have Sam Wilson for movement in this list, and you have Kahori for your hand, having all sorts of different spells in there that you're maybe not playing out on curve to give you also additional value for the cards you already have on the board. So some solid options that I really like there. And playing some Agamotto Werewolf always is a very fun time. Of course, you got to think about stuff more, and of course, your deck is a little bit more bloated with Agamotto, but I think it just makes a lot of sense to kind of maybe have more of this. Maybe you want to put Nicholas Scratch in here because you have Merlin, because you have Prowler, because you have Agamotto. Maybe, but I think Nicholas Scratch does a little bit of cope at the moment. But yeah, that's going to be the gist of the decks over here. As we move on to some of my rankings for the Prowler, I do think this card is very strong. I think it is a 4 to 5 stars. If it had been every single turn it checks to see if a card moved and then your skills cost 0, then I think it would have been a 5 out of 5 stars. But I still think it's going to be a 4 out of 5 star. I still think it's going to be pretty strong, fairly flexible. Of course, if you want to get the best value, you play it with cards that move in order to make it so your skills cost 0. But I don't think you have to play this in a deck where your skills have to cost 0, right? I feel like you get some of that extra utility, like still like a kind of Kate Bishop mixed with like a Merlin because it doesn't take up the board space. I think it's going to be really solid for this card. If the skills are too good, maybe that's if they adjust them, but I don't think right now that they've seen like too good that they just need to adjust them immediately. I think this is going to be good, but I don't think this is going to be like the craziest thing, ever kind of situation. So I think this card's going to be pretty balanced, I would say fairly. But I think you should buy this card. I think that this card is going to be really, really good. I think it's probably the best Series 5 card this season. I think I think Prowler and Manspider are probably the 2 best cards of this season. Spoiler alert. So I think I was totally wrong about Manspider. We talked about this earlier. But I think the Prowler is still going to be fantastic, even if the skills cost 1. Because like 1-cost skills in general, like when we talked about like with Merlin and stuff, were already really good. So I wouldn't be surprised if Prowler is also just really, really, really good. But of course, like always, guys, I want you guys to take this potentially with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, we do not have hands-on access to this cards. We do not know how the meta is going to shape up necessarily until the card is released. We are theory crafting these decks, these ideas, these key synergies, key counters. Aren't the entirety of the key synergies and key counters. There's other cards that can counter and there's other cards that can benefit from this, So, like, at the end of the day, we're theory crafting. We're just putting our heads together, seeing, what potentially could happen with this. We can be wrong about cards. Like, I was wrong about Manspider. And we could also be right about cards, kind of like how we were kind of right about Noir, which Noir, I actually have had a lot of fun with Noir, but it's still not necessarily a card to be like, yes, you guys have to get Noir kind of thing. And at the end of the day, right, bad cards get buffed and good cards get nerfed. Zombie Galacti is now a 7-5, so is a bit more playable than it was at a 7-4. Still doesn't make it necessarily amazing, but more playable is good because, they can change more of these cards in OTAs now because of, Spotlight Caches still being gone and us having packs where they're in packs for 2 months kind of situation. Like, there still is some value that there, and, at the end of the day, move is going to be meta, right? So why not get Prowler with move being meta as is? Sparky got a slap on the wrist. but I don't think it's enough for Sparky or for that move package, because I still think in general it's amazing, because Human Torch is just the best card in the game. But at the end of the day, guys, spend your resources the way you guys want to spend your resources. We are playing a video game. This is all for fun. This is supposed to bring us joy. If you guys want to sweat, sweat. If you guys don't want to sweat, don't sweat, and just play fun decks. You know, at the end of the day, you want to do what makes you happy and what's going to bring you the most joy. The best way for you to have a good holiday season, I guess, this season, right? So, just keep that in mind. This also is the last Series 5 card releasing for the Arachnid Anarchy season before we move into the Weapon X season, which the Weapon X cards look even better than the cards this season. So there's an opportunity where maybe you're saving for them, and I would, honestly, why not? Get the cards you want to play, get the characters you really enjoy playing, So, it's Marvel Snap, guys. It's a video game. Let's have some fun. But that's going to be the gist of Buy or Bust for us today. If you guys do enjoy the video, definitely feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. And then, let me know down below. What have you guys thought about this season so far? And are you guys planning on getting the Prowler? Anyways, it's been real. God bless, and Tucker out.